Hi class, this is chapter 2 and we'll start right away. So let me share the screen with you. Okay, in this chapter we will be talking about the strategy and sustainabilities, and the learning outcome is know what a sustainable strategy and how it relates to operation and supply chain management. We will define the operation and supply chain management, explaining how operation supply chain strategies are implemented, understand why strategy have implications relative to business risk, and evaluate the productivities in operation and supply chain management. But before we start that, I would like to just explain something for you. Maybe that will help you to understand how strategy is related to business, to supply chain management and operation. As we said, like in earlier, we said that there is an option of going from point A in a C to point B in a C, and if you have a small boat made of 1 or 2 people and you find obstacles, it's very easy to maneuver between them and get from point A to B. But if you have a medium ship or a large ship and have people on it and there is a captain and gas is needed or diesel and a certain timing, there is a port that you need to stop by and port to move in, and there is an obstacle there, then you need a plan to move from point A to B. And this plan should be communicated with all people who is a stakeholder or shareholder in that big ship. So because they have to get the gas or the diesel, they have to get enough manpower, they have to know how long it takes to be in the move around the obstacles if you find. So all it's like you need to build a strategy according in a business strategy plan to move your big ship from point A to point B, and this should be communicated with everybody. So that's the same thing. If we're talking about mid-sized to large-sized companies, you still need a strategic plan to do that. And please keep that in your mind while we are presenting this chapter further. Now, sustainable operation, it comes from sustainabilities and the ability to meet the current resource needed without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their need. It means that you're supposed not to put your hand in the future resources. And when you're consuming the resource, you need to think about the futures and next generations also. The firm's strategy describes how it will create and sustain value for its current shareholders. And it means every firm has 2 parts, is the shareholders and the stakeholders. So the shareholders, individual or companies that legally own 1 or more shares of the stock in that company, or partnership and somebody owns part of that share. The stakeholder, on other hand, individual or organization who are directly or indirectly influenced by the action of the firm. So if the firm shuts off and stop producing, some customer or a supplier cannot produce more, or the customer, who could be a company, can runs out of these supplies. So these are considered to be stakeholders. Employees are stakeholders. The management are stakeholders. Uh, but the owners or companies who are shareholders. So the goal of sustainability means that the scope of the firm's strategy must focus on really three areas or the triple bottoms, which is you're going to see it in how it looks in the next slide. But it has the three things is the social responsibility, the economic prosperities, and the environmental stewardship. The social responsibility is the business practice should be fair to labor, to community, and to the region where the firms conduct businesses. The economic prosperities, the shareholders must be compensated via the competitive return. Because if the shareholder doesn't get compensated, he can cut on his resources. And the environmental stewardship is the company should protect the environment as much as possible. And this is a very good trend to do it in North America and in Western Europe. It can generate lots of business for any company who does these three, especially the last thing. Now, this is the triple thing. They said the economic prosperities, the social responsibility, and the environment stewardship. And they have to, any company has to take these things into considerations. Now, when it comes to operation and supply chain strategy, as we said, um, it is setting broad policies and plans for using the resources of a firm must be integrated with the corporate strategy because the corporate strategy is setting up goals. So when you are using the resource of the firm should be toward meeting these goals. The corporate strategy provides overall direction and coordination operation goals with those for the larger organization. Let me give you an example. If you're talking about a company with provide a services and they want to be a service providers, so they need us, they go to this, they share this uh, corporate strategy with the, let's say, the IT manager. Accordingly, with this corporate strategy, IT managers are selecting and building softwares and service to help to provide the company the services. And same time, they share this goal with the HR manager. And the HR manager also will be bringing the manpower with the certain skills that they can deliver the services with it. And they can, um, on with all the management level, and the management level will be responsible to implement their part of the work where they all put together in order to meet the strategy plan of the company. So the operation effectiveness, in other words, on other hand, is the performing activities in a manner, any kind of activities within the company that best implements the strategies priorities at the minimum cost. Means when you build the plan, and we will go through this example later on, you need to see how you're going to be effective and at the same time efficient at the lowest cost possible and effective at the same time. So when you are having a factory or a firm provide service, doesn't matter legal service or doctors or anything, there is a competitive dimension that you need to look at it from supply chain management and operation. And the first one is the cost or the price. So you probably want to make the product or delivery, the service is cheap, because the profit is sales minus the cost. You need to look at the quality and make the great product or delivery as a great services. Now, all these things, you need to balance between them. You need to find out where is the edge. You cannot have all these things together in the same time. Delivery speed, make the product or delivery the services as quickly. Delivery reliabilities, when you're doing a delivery, you deliver on time and you are right. If you promise within 48 hours, it should be delivered within 48 hours or within 5 working days or something like that. So you have to have deliver it when promised. Um, Coping with the change in demand. So if suddenly your demand increase, you should be able to do that. And it has to be part of your plan or how you're going to cope with the demands, if it's increase or decrease. And you have to have a flexibility and a new product introduction speed. So when you flexible, you can change the service that you provide or the product, and you can be very quickly to add on a new product and service, the speed. Other product specific criteria, you should be able, if you're providing product, you can do a technical assistant, meeting launch, something gives you an edge, offers sales support, after sales support, environment impact, something that gives you edge over the competitions. So these are the issues that you need to really look at it and do the competitive dimensions for it. Now, furthermore, some other like technical liaison and support. A supplier may be expected to provide technical assistance for a product. As we say, there is, pure product with a service, service with a product, and a pure service. So let's say you're providing your product with a service, and your service is technical assistant for the product development and all these things. Ability to meet the launch date, requirement of coordinating with other firms on a complex project, so they know when you're supposed to deliver, so they can set up their also line of production, or they produce before you to supply you, all these things. Um, as we said, supplier after sales support involve the availability of replacement part. So if you're selling something that you don't have replacement part, and when you buy a car or something, the first thing you are worried about it is the parts. And some uh, cars usually are not very much people are interested in it because the parts is not available. As an example, difficult to get the parts, and some of them are people are interested in it because of purely because the parts are available in everywhere, like Dodge, GM, Honda, their parts are available, so that makes it more valuable has more value in it. You need to look at the related criteria such as carbon dioxide emissions, the use of non-renewable resources. As I said, we're going to see in the video how later on Ford and other car manufacturers are reusing things, uh, minimizing the resources. And the other dimensions probably is uh, colors available, size, weight, location, customization. These are things that you're in charge of looking at them in order to have an edge over uh, others. So what's the trade-offs? Management must decide the parameters of the performance are critical and concentrate on the resource of that characteristic. This is what you do. When we mentioned all these characteristics, most of the time you're not able to meet all these characteristics. And you need to know some characteristic that you are able to meet and have an edge on them, where in order for you to perform, because there is issue, bottom line is selling your service or is selling your product. So these are things that you need to look at it, where you can really improve and where is being advanced ahead of everybody, and where is the part that you cannot really do anything about it. So focus on this. So management, an operation cannot simultaneously excel on all competitive dimensions. For example, like a firm that is focused on a low-cost production may not be capable of quickly introducing a new product because they're in a low-cost production and probably homogeneous production, so they'd not be able to produce a new product very quickly. Um, a strategic position is not sustainable unless there is a compromise with the other positions. So if you want to be ahead or you want to have a strategic, as we said, you sometimes you look at the efficiency versus the effectiveness, and you don't want to lose your customers waiting online. So you have more employees, so you became less efficient and but more effective. So you need to do all these calculations to find out how you're gonna, choose what make you stand out with between the other competition. So straddling is when you are seeking to match some successful competitors by adding the features, further service, technology, or existing activities. And it's probably if you're trying to match the others, sometimes you're not looking at yourself pretty well as a company, and it could be a little bit risky to do so. Um, so you have to understand one thing, it's a difference between order winners and order qualifiers. You see, when sometimes in every company, mid-size or large or government, usually they publish RFI, request for information. During that request for information, there is some conditions that you put there where this all everybody gets allowed to submit their answers. Sometimes they try to limit it, but it's open for the public. So after this request for information, then you select few of them, and it becomes an RFP, which is a request for a proposal. And there is where, when you move from RFI to RFP, you have an order qualifier. You are become one of the 10 companies qualifier. But between all these 10 companies, one company who will be winning this deal, which is they call them the order winner. So describe marketing oriented dimensions that are the keys to competitive success. Order winners are criteria that differentiate the products or service one firm from the others. And another example, like you say, um, to do a qualifier, you say, I need 100 laptops. Who can supply me from all these manufacturing, like HP, Dell, and all, IBM? But that's order qualifier. So all these companies can do a laptop, so they come in. But then you need, say, I need a storage of 20 terabytes or something like that. And there's only one company who can do that. That's what makes a order winner. So order qualifier are a screening dimension that permits a firm product to consider as possible as candidate for purchase, but they're not order winners. One of them could be an order winner or some of them. Future customer would not forge, would not ignore. There is 10 features the customer looks at them, and 9 of them are met for everybody, and they are order qualifier, but number 10, one of them is better than everybody else. That it's more complicated than that, but let's say put it this way. Number 10 is one company is better than everybody else, could be the pricing or whatever, delivery time or the quality, and that makes it, that company wins, so that's what you call an order winner. Now, um, so if we look at IKEA, for example, and IKEA, most of the companies, what they do, they look at the customer, their customers, and they work background to make sure that they can see how the things can perform. So in IKEA, the diagram that shows here how a company's strategy is delivered through a set of supporting activities. See, in manufacturing, which is here, IKEA design staff focus on minimizing the cost of manufacturing. But what's their customer? Customers are young, not wealthy, and have children. They're looking for a product, low cost, modular furniture that is easy to transport. So according to that, IKEA, what they did, IKEA designed a staff focus on minimizing the cost of manufacturing and in the field of infrastructure features. Manufacturing by a long-term suppliers and a high level of inventory to maximize the availability. When it comes to the level of the service feature, what they do, they provide service selection by customer. So the customer will go and select their product, and unassembled furniture lies flat for easy transportation and minimize uses of warehousing space and transportation costs. Then when it comes to the store future, they're located in suburbans, and they have a place for the child care, room-like display so that you can see the display, but then you go on the very wide aisles, support high traffic, and then the warehouse is the same store, so you pick up your cartons. And this is how they meet the young, not wealthy, and have children customers. So you look at you segment your market, and then you try to meet and make it a winner for your case. Now, while you're working an operation, probably there is so many things that you need to get in order to produce. Now, most of us don't see the details that goes to produce, for example, a pen or a very simple a paper, uh, not to forget about the more complex thing. We have a tendency of looking at it, buying it, or selling it, but we don't know how difficult to build, how complicated to do that. So first part is that you need to assess the risk. Because you have suppliers, you have products coming in from everywhere, and you need to assemble it and sell it somewhere else. Maybe you are in the middle of things. Now, so uncertainties in the environment cause supply chain planner to evaluate the relative riskiness of their operation and strategies. They put it in a scale and try to see how can they mitigate the risk got to do with the supply. Supply chain risk is likelihood of disruption that would impact the ability of a company to continue supply of product or services. And simple is no electricity. So you cannot operate in a dark manufacturing, for example. Simple, there is no water, so you cannot cool in the machines, or no internet, so you cannot provide the services. These are all risk things. Um, so the supply chain coordination risks are associated with the day-to-day management of supply chain. They look at all the way of the supply chain, and they try to see the risk there. So if you bring a product, they're looking at the supplier, the transportation, the processing, and the transportation to the customer if they have the responsibility for distributing. Um, so the disruption risk or cause could be caused by natural or man-made disaster. Now, to break it down, um, first, what you do, you need to look at to identify the risk, identify the source of potential disruption. Let's say you need water, and so or you need electricity, and you want to know where you get your electricity from, how secure it is, or whether you need a backup company or you need um, probably a electricity generator. Most of us don't think of that, but um, uh, when I was in one of the colleges that I was teaching, we had electricity broke. There's no electricity, stopped, and it was So the best thing that they had generators, but the other colleges who probably didn't have the generators, they had all the system down, they had all the electricity. So um, there is no disaster recovery plan. You need to build a disaster recovery plan. So identify the source of potential disruption, highly situation dependent. Focus should be on highly unlikely event also. Assess the potential impact of the risk. So goals is to qualify the probability. What's the chance of this might happen, and what's the impact of it? Let's say, for example, the electricity. The chance of the electricity is pretty low that you don't have electricity in Canada. Chance very low, but the impact is big because the internet is down, the students are not getting their service, the school is, the college or the university is off. So the impact is big. So that's the reason they thought of the having a generators. And you need to know where you're gonna, set up, because you're not gonna have a full backup to everything unless it is necessary. Then you develop the plan to mitigate that risk, to minimize that risk, to cancel that risk, and detailed strategy for minimizing the impact of the risk. Okay, so so the situation is the fact that uh, you need, like this exhibition, you need to look at the type of risk and risk, how we gonna risk mitigation strategy. For example, the natural disaster, when a typhoon happens, when the monsoon is happening, there is an effect on them for as a supplier. Like now, what we have is also there is, with the COVID-19, and there is some effect on them where suppliers are not operating very well. So you need to have a contingency plan, alternate site, uh, uh, get it from somewhere else, and plus insurance for it. There could be a country risk. A country suddenly goes into war, or it gets blocked, and you need to do a hedge currency, or the money itself goes high or low. So you need to do a hedge currencies, and this is happening a lot, especially in the oil field, where people you know, do the hedge, buy things 10 years down the road because they just don't want to have, problem with the currency. Produce source of it. You need to look at the supplier failure. So this way you can um, do a multiple supplier setup. So if one supplier fails, you still have the other suppliers can meet your need and demand. Network provider failure, and to mitigate it, you support of redundant digital network. And as I said, I brought the electricity, but once your network is failed, there is other way of getting your network supplied. Um, Regulatory risk, and you need to do an upfront and continuing research, good legal advice, and compliance. So if you feel that in some countries that legally might be risky to supply you with these materials, then you need to have another country or another way of getting this material ready for you. Um, a good example, chemical supplying sometimes regulatory stops that. Um, you get the commodity price risk. So the price goes up and down. So you wanted to make sure that you have multiple suppliers. So you have a multi-sourcing, commodity hedging, as I said, is a big in oil, especially in oil. You do a commodity hedging. Uh, these days, I mean, 2 months ago or a few months ago, the barrel went to zero price, $0. And the only reason is because, there is a certain production and there is not enough storage and cost so much to store it. So they were rather to sell it at a $0 per barrel than keep it in their storage and cost them $10 per barrel or something like that. So there is where you start thinking of commodity price risk and multi-sourcing and commodity hedging. Logistic failure is a very simple example. Somebody who is delivering things for you it suddenly stops. So as an example, in the early COVID case, suddenly they stopped all the trucks that coming from USA to Canada and vice versa. So if your supplier is only in a state or in Mexico and you're using trucks, you probably got into trouble because you don't have the sub. So you need to mitigate these issues also, the logistic failure. Inventories risk, you always have to do a calculation how much inventories you need to have in your warehouse without overspending or without running out of this. And in later on chapters, we'll be looking at how to set up the lean supply and all the suppliers to get their inventory, exact inventory, just in time or something like that. Uh, Major quality failure, careful selection and monitoring of suppliers, loss of the customer, service of production of innovation. Once again, um, you don't need, you have to be inefficient and lowering your costs, but in the same time, you don't want, for example, people waiting in line so long so they can find somebody else can provide that. So you don't want to lose. So you need to be ineffective and efficient in the same time. And the theft and vandalism, so you have insurance, security precaution, knowledge of likely risk of the. These things that you need to look at them and you need to know how to mitigate each one of them. So in overall, you probably need to look at something like that, break it down. And when you're talking about, for example, outsourcing, you look at the natural human-made disaster, which is moderate impact. The green one, no impact. What's impacting on you is that you need to look at them and mitigate them and move them to a green. What's really, there's two parts, chance of happening and when it's happening, what's the impact? This is how you look at the thing. So here is like in this exhibit, you would see that's like a quality risk. If you're outsourcing the supplier or the product, is going to be, might be, there is some quality risk involved in it. And so many things that you bought, you thought it's like, for example, um, made in Japan. When you looked at it, it's made in different country, and then you saw the quality is really dumped in and becomes really low. So these are things that you, as a factory and company service provider involved in supply chain, you need to look at them very carefully and try to mitigate them according to the impact on your supply chain and the business flow. On other hand, you need to also look at the productivities and look at the measures of productivities. And there is so many ways of doing the productivity, but the more important is you cannot look at your productivity standalone. You have to compare it, you have a benchmark, compare it with the competition or other companies or in whatever is available in the market. But productivity is the common measure of how well resources are used. And it's basically it's output divided by input. So whatever you put in, how much you can get out of that. And this is what you call an efficient levels of productivity. Productivity is called a relative measures. As we said, you have to compare it related to other levels of productivities of other factories or yesterday or last year, how it's been improved. So there should be some benchmark that you can compare. So must be compared to something else to be meaningful. Company can compare itself with a similar operation within its industries, measuring productivity over time within the same operation. As I said, you say you measure it now, and you have measured it last year, and you see how being improved, or you can measure it with others. A partial productivity measure the ratio of some output to a single input. There is other way of doing it, and we will see it in the next slide. You will see what do we mean by partial productivity, multi-factor productivity measures, and there is total productivity measures. So here the partial measures like output, you can do the output to labor, you can do output to capital, you can do the output to the materials or output to energy. And all this is get it from the financial statements, and you can do that. The multi-factor, this is the partial one. The multi-factor measures, the output is always on the top, and you probably can make a combination of some of these and you get the multi-factor measures, and then you get the total measures. And this is all you want to see the productivities, how effective is your operation. And as I said, you can get it from the financial statement, all these data can be done. In the partial measures productivities, like that's only an example. You probably in a restaurant you want to look at how many meals you do per hour. In a retail store, sales per square foot happening. And that's the previous setup, the price of your business. The chicken farms, pounds of meat per pounds of feed. There is different way of product. Utility plant, how many kilowatt hours per ton of coal that you produce or per whatever the input. Paper mills, tons of papers per quart of wood, how much you produce. These are all business setups that produce, shows you the total quality, the partial productivity, I'm sorry. So basically, this is kind of the end of the chapter, and we'll continue with the class, and you have a nice time.